All right. Okay, it's going to be a 20-minute fireside chat, so there's lots to chat about. And I'd also like to make sure our audience is engaged, so feel free to think about questions. Use the Slido app to share. We should have them pop up on our screen. But really, to start things off, we know that we've been talking about resilience, we've been talking about innovation the whole day, and we know that there's a lot of change going on in the food system today. We've got changing consumer needs towards more nutritious, healthy foods. We were just discussing how nutrition and affordability can no longer be a trade-off. And then, of course, how are we thinking about climate pressures and greater resilience? And more often than not, I've been in multiple of these discussions, technology and innovation seems like this blanket solution to solving the world's food crisis. Innovation, we talked about finance, we talk about technology, we talk about climate smart practices. So I want to just set the stage today, maybe with a question to you, Geert, from like an R&D industry perspective. Why are the challenges that we have today, why are they demanding new approaches to innovation? Are they demanding new approaches to innovation, and why?
So yes, because the current approaches are not good enough. And so this is each time the story about innovation, right? So when you talk about innovation, you step into something new because you're stepping out of something you already know and that you're dissatisfied with. There are, in the current food system, there are big parts which absolutely do work very, very well. And what are those things? How do we preserve those things? How do we make sure that those things help us moving towards a better end state? But then there are things where, because of the way that the world is changing today, if that is either because of climate change, because of our changing nutritional needs, because of how consumer preferences are changing, because of affordability of food, and we talked earlier about value and value through that entire chain, such that everybody in that chain can earn its living, because those things are changing, we have to come up with something new. And that means, on the one hand, respecting our planet better and different. And then you talk about regenerative agriculture, and you talk about all the changes and the things we learned today about microbiome being soil or animal or human. Those things really help us forward. But the reason why we do it is because we can't accept today's status quo of a world where we're still adding in the next 5-6 years. What are we going to add? 500 more people that's going to be added to the planet. So they need to be nourished as well. We're living on a planet where there's about, where are we today? 700, 800 million people who don't have enough to eat. And then we have a little bit over 2 billion people who are not eating in the right way and who have other problems. And so we cannot accept that. We have to change that. And if we change that either by the good traditional ways or by bringing in the new technologies, it will be an and story that makes us resilient for the next, say, 30, 40, 50 years.
And Andy, that "and" I have heard you say before, which is we need all the tools in the toolbox. Can you share a little bit about where, to sort of add to Geert's point, where is that innovation falling apart right now? And what is your role in helping support the system?
Well, first of all, just to compliment there. I mean, if you look at any major sector, and I guess I come at this much from a sustainability angle, but the investment that's going in, you look at energy, you look at transport. I mean, the R&D percentage that the food sector is actually investing in R&D is tiny compared, and you can't expect to have major revolutions, I think, with in transformations, improvement of that with such low levels of R&D. So I think that there is yes, everyone talks technology, innovation, and so on, but the numbers, the bottom line is it's a very small percentage goes in, and you can then dig under the surface and you look at different sectors, fertilizers and so on, and you look at the R&D, and it's just not it's not big enough. So I think if we do recognize that we have a problem with the food system, we do need to transform it. We do need to invest more in that. So that's the first point. But then just to more address the question. I work at the Bezos Earth Fund, a philanthropy in this space, and I think we come at this. The kind of my mandate is go where the market is failing, That kind of bolsters this point. The market's failing because it's not investing enough in R&D and innovation. And that investment is often not looking at it's very short-term investment, is looking at, kind of solving the problem immediately in front. Whereas, I think we need to be thinking the scale of the problem requires kind of long-term, large-scale thinking. And so I think, that's where we see ourselves fitting in. So philanthropy can do a few things that's useful in this space. One is we can be taking risks, so doing things that don't have certainty of actually delivering a result. So we have a quite high risk threshold. We can be doing things that that are too long term for private capital to flow. Even VC money is pretty impatient. So you can use philanthropy to do, those long-term bets on things. You can also think about market shaping. So there's quite a few very successful examples in other sectors of where philanthropy helps do a couple of things. One is how do you create advanced market commitments? How do you kind of buffer if something's going to take 5 years, you've got to build it to be able to produce it, and then you need a buyer at that point. Maybe private capital doesn't take that risk, but you can use philanthropy to support advanced market commitments or market shaping, aggregate demand. So that's also worked in things like hydrogen, and now there's initiatives, interesting ones in touching the food sector on green ammonia. So you can do those kinds of things. It's really much complementing. How can you move pre-competitive spaces, move the kind of line of pre-competitive as well to support the whole field. So that's another area in alternative proteins. We've been working on that. How can you do stuff? There's lots of duplication, lots of companies all spending the same precious R&D money on things. We can move the pre-competitive line so that there's less duplication and there's more value addition with the innovation, that the money that is in the private sector.
So you're coming in at the stage before Geert and the private sector come in to be able to de-risk some of that.
Yeah, I think de-risking is critical. You come in kind of before, but with, so that it is useful. I mean, in the end of the day, the things that will move in the food system is when the private sector is picking up and leading with it. So it's very much in partnership, but it's that before stage.
And I guess I have a follow-up for that, and maybe for both of you. So you said R&D is not as high as in other sectors in the food space, right? Who needs to take the charge on that? Is it organizations and industry? We talked about de-risking and being able to come in before R&D and industry comes in. Is it on you? Is it everyone?
I mean, I'll come in and I'll use a very concrete example. So I mean, we do lots of things. We work on in the afternoon. I'm talking about livestock, but I thought in this panel I'll talk more about alternatives to animal agriculture. So alternative proteins. And I mean, you look at the investment profile on that. This is an industry with enormous potential, like billions of dollars of potential market if they get products that are priced right, tasting right, nutritionally and healthy. Enormous potential, but and you look, there was a flood of money came in kind of during the pandemic, but the government spending on that practically zero. So I mean, the problem that we identified there, where philanthropy can play a role, is just that kind of open access foundational research that the whole field, the whole industry can benefit from. It was absent, and so you need, there's a need for government funding. Obviously, you need private sector to be investing more on the R&D and longer term in their R&D. It is coming from everywhere, but you can look at pretty much everything that we kind of have dug into. You just see a lack of long-term thinking and a lack of actual amount of funds going into R&D to transform those systems.
Geert, from an industry perspective,
it's an and story because it's an entire value chain from an idea till something is ready that consumers can afford it and are willing to pay it. And I fully agree with what Andy is saying. You need to start shaking it from the very beginning. But then we continuously need to look for how do we as quickly as possible commercialize this and can prove if it has a viability in the market. And in one of the earlier panels here, people were talking about precision fermentation at farm level. In European level, there has been flagship investments where EU has co-invested in how do you demonstrate that certain technologies can be scaled up? And we've been involved in a few of those where we've co-located people close to our existing sites and making people sure that collaborations happen there. And Plenitude is one of those examples. But those are the things that need to happen, right? Because it's not only about the funding and the money and how you do it. It's also on who are the people you can bring around the table and make sure that you can get from idea to an accepted consumer. And that, yes, that takes academia, and that takes people, that takes philanthropy, that takes governments, that takes regulatory frameworks to make sure that if you do produce something that you can actually make it, right? And so that's why I'm saying it's an and story. Where another statement, I think it was Richard from EIT that made that statement earlier, that if we want to make this, it's going to have to be a very diverse cycle. It cannot be one offering. It cannot be only precision fermented protein. It will be precision fermented protein next to what's happening on the farm level. And that diversity will create that resilience in the food system that we really need.
Yeah. And can I ask, what do you need from regulators or policy? What would it take to be able to do more of this?
Dangerous topic. We'll come on that. So I think we do need that transparent, regulatory framework, which is stable and which is fair, right? And I think certainly in Europe we have that. That transparency is there, and the level of how things are happening there are exactly what we need and what all of us expect as consumer. We don't want to go outside and be exposed to risks that nobody wants. But we do need to look at it, and Europe is looking at that right now, to make sure that that regulatory framework also remains competitive.
Yep.
Because we are living in a global economy, and yes, we're trying to think about how do we make supply chains shorter, et cetera, but therefore we need to make sure that that competitiveness versus the rest of the world remains there. And so that balance, finding that balance in creating the speed and the agility in the regulatory frameworks while maintaining the good things that it brings on food security, food safety, that is the essence of it. Right?
And having some guiding principles to be able to dictate both the balance of agility and
creating that clarity. Because if the system is so slow or the system is so heavy that a startup could never afford to go through that room, and if the competitive space is such that European-based bigger companies are choosing to go outside of Europe because it simply goes faster and easier elsewhere, we lose on both ends. And that we cannot have. So the change is needed there. I think, at least from an industry perspective, saying that we have been heard already feels quite good. And now let's see how we translate that into more agility and more action.
Yeah, I think that we know that policymakers are keen to know and understand. It's about translating it into actual policy. Andy, from your perspective?
I think, the regulatory thing is definitely, it's critical. I like to talk about like kind of positive stories on that. The UK right now has a sandbox on cultivated meat, which is world leading. And it's created this space, can you imagine being an investor in cultivated meat in the US? You kind of set up your company, you get your investors. Obviously, you need regulatory approval to get anything to market, and you submit your papers. You do all this R&D. You submit your papers. It takes 5 years to get a response, and there's a back and forth and so on. But it takes 5 years. That is a very hard situation to get any investment into the space when that's the reality that companies are facing. Obviously, right now it's the kind of icebreakers in the industry. They're just getting, the first time you do it, it's a very difficult job for a regulator. But the sandbox in the UK is fantastic. It's bringing those kind of innovators, academia, the knowledge brokers together kind of closer with regulators to do this right. So I think we need more examples like that.
Yeah. Andy, question for you on the Slido. What are you doing on alternative proteins beyond private sector innovation? Where is the biggest potential?
Yeah. So, and there's another question that's kind of simple, similar. So I can do that. One of the things we did, as I said, we identified the kind of that wasn't this foundation of public research, of open access work. So we created these three, what we call the Bezos Centers for Sustainable Protein. There's one here in London in Imperial, there's one in NC State in the US, and there's one in the University of Singapore. And those centers, what they're doing are the kind of foundational work. So they're identifying, they're kind of working with industry, but not for industry. They're identifying what are some of the common challenges that we have across the field, and how can we overcome those. So they're looking at the kind of the basic research. We're doing some fantastic stuff right now on AI, and how you can use AI to kind of speed up and accelerate progress in this space. So most of our funds have gone to kind of research in academic organizations, and kind of creating a much stronger kind of base foundation for these things. What gets me excited right now is certainly fermentation. I think like it doesn't sound very nice, microbial foods, but I've got the hang of saying it now. But the wonder of fungi get me. I just think fungi are incredible, as organisms, right? And I think there's an amazing that we're just scratching the surface in terms of understanding what we can do with fungi. And, fermenting, we can pretty much produce any product by just finding the right fungi, sending the right signals, giving the right things. And it's just going to be so efficient. The efficiency of, anyone who's watched a mushroom grow, it's faster than paint drying. So it's great. So I think fungi are going to be
it's exciting. Geert, what about you? What are you excited about?
Well, we are one of the biggest industrial fermenters in the world, and we do supply a lot of feedstock for people who are fermenting. So I'll skip that one.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very exciting one. And I'm going to go with hybrid. Because if you, and I think it was mentioned in one of the earlier panels as well, but if you think about making the combination between something like an animal-based protein with a plant-based protein or a microbial protein, what impact that has on total sustainability on the one hand, but on the other hand, on how much acceptance and penetration that these kind of things have. Because convincing people to completely change their dietary habits and letting go of everything that you've been used to, and either your chicken or your turkey that you have on Sunday, or your steak or something, and moving to something completely new is going to take much longer time.
Yeah.
And that hybrid is something that we see as something that we see more and more interest in markets. We see in certain markets, we see people accepting that, and that is going to drive some of the speed and probably also some of the acceptance
Adoption.
that consumers need before they step fully into microbial or fermented.
It eases into increases adoption slowly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any question from the audience? All right, I do see one right in front of me here. If you're happy to be loud.
Sorry, Tom Allen Stevens, the British On-Farm Innovation Network. Thank you. Tom Allen Stevens, the British On-Farm Innovation Network. I'm just interested to know, how you feel the role of the farmer plays in this, and on-farm research in particular. We've got about 100 farmers that we're paying through on-farm trials. We've been very successful at getting government funding. We cannot get the supply chain to fund it. They just don't get it at all. So give me some advice. How do we have to frame this in order to get the supply chain to recognize the value of that? And by the way, the fungi, we've got some farmers doing fantastic things with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi in their soil. So if you're interested, let's talk afterwards.
Okay. 20-second advice for how do they get this off the ground?
You want to go first?
The farm is the start of everything in the food system. So for us, this is crucial, and that's where everything starts. Best advice we can give is build those networks with people that are willing to move on and willing to try. The challenge that we see, or what we're trying to do, is trying to be that connector that helps people to scale. And so happy to talk and see how we can do that. I think one of my colleagues was up here earlier who talked about programs we have going on all over the world to incentivize farmers and to help people grow and change their cultivating practices, because that's where it's going to have to start. Must.
I mean, there's lots of throwaway phrases, start with the farmers, talk to the farmers, have farmers in the room, kind of making the decisions, all of that stuff. But the reality that so many farmers are facing right now, they're completely back against the wall. The margins are tiny, getting squeezed from every side. I think there's a systemic thing of we have to look after farmers, as a society, that we're not doing right now. So I think it's very hard to get anything really working when farmers are in that situation. So I think there's a more systemic issue.
Yeah, it's great silver lining that you have industry folk that want to talk, and hopefully policy money coming through as well. On that note, thank you very much to Geert. Thank you very much to Andy for sharing your thoughts with us. I know we're way over time, so back to you, Apurva.